Hello, welcome back to my studio. In this video, we're going to be looking at watercolor and pastel painting. This video is an extract from my new course on watercolor and pastel painting techniques. So you can sit back and see how I use watercolor and pastel to create fun and interesting journal paintings. Very simply done, just with a journal like this. It's got some nice watercolor paper in, 300 grams, and no pressure, having a lot of fun and recording things like travel memories or maybe a spontaneous sketch that catches your eye and you might want to turn it into a painting later on. If you're interested in learning more about watercolor and pastel painting techniques, then check out the link below to the course. Hope you enjoy this, and if you do, please share it and subscribe. Leave a comment if you want as well. Be great to hear from you. This is the scene on which I'm basing this painting, and I'm using my 300 gram A5 journal paper. It's basically watercolor paper in a spiral bound booklet. Basic materials, and starting off with drawing the horizon line in pencil and then just getting the main composition, the lines of the road established, and filling in the hills in the distance and working quite quickly. Just don't take a lot of time on this. With a subject like this, you can just glance at your reference, or if you're outdoors, look up, have a look at what's there and just quickly make notes. Look for dark shapes, look for composition lines. Those are all very important. Look for shadows, fill those in as well. And once you're happy with that you got the main shapes in place, start off with the watercolor. And here I'm using a memory point brush, watercolor brush, very useful, and using a bit of ultramarine blue and a little bit of purple mixed in there. Just really a dirty color. I tend to keep my palette quite dirty, and it helps with these sort of vaporous colors. So getting this sky, the blue of the sky in there, and leaving white in the paper to suggest the clouds, and some more of that dirty color. This is leaning towards purples. Got a bit of yellow ochre in there, and it's sort of muddied it up a little, but that's what aerial perspective does. Now this is more clean yellow ochre and touches of burnt sienna, also quite diluted because we are creating aerial perspective. I want to push this distance back, and you can see just getting some foreground color now, some deep yellow, a little bit of green mixed in there, and just brushing that on quickly, creating spontaneous sparkle as well. As you can see, letting the paper create some sparkle, but work quickly with those brush strokes. Now dropping in some yellow ochre and green, suggesting shapes out in the countryside, bushes, shrubs, some of this desert shrub that makes these delightful little dark shapes out in the countryside. Getting a bit of a block in the road, and because I'm working in layers, I'm starting off with this kind of yellow ochre color. I'll go over it later on. Now dropping in some of those darker shapes here and there, and of course all the warm colors need some cool, so a few dots of blue, using a bit of burnt sienna to add in the warm colors in the foreground. So in the foregrounds of the road will be warmer colors. In the distance, I'll cool them down. And now the cool colors, these are the shadow bits. As you can see, the ruts on the side of the road, just dropping in these cool colors, bit of blue, bit of alizarin crimson, dark shapes, all very suggestive, very abstract. I'm not trying to describe a particular shape, but a general scene. Warming up the sunlit side of the distant hills, but with a cooler reddish color, bit of alizarin, touch of blue in there, keeping it diluted. In the foreground again, more saturated burnt sienna. Quick brush strokes, raising some sparkle with the paper. Also direction lines in the road. The road has a lot of marks in it. I'm creating texture, just seeing how things develop. Now a small brush, this is a little sable brush. I don't use small brushes a lot, but in this type of journal painting it's quite handy, especially for these little shapes that I'm putting in right now. Just a bit of green, bit of yellow ochre. A few darker shapes as well. Shapes get smaller into the distance, so suggesting depth. And some of these cool blues, sort of cerulean blue. You can see how nicely it contrasts against the warms of the yellows and oranges. So now suggesting a few of the deeper lines in the road. Just a few of these, not too much. And now the shadow side of the hills, just getting a bit more definition. Little cool yellow ochre in there. So once the watercolor is dry, you can leave it as it is or get out the pastels. And of course, I can't resist getting some pastel. The pastels bringing some strong color. See how the lights just shine up, sparkle. And because there's a lot of space to drop in pastel between the watercolor, and the paper is thick enough to allow the pastel layers to grip, so you've got leeway. You can still work in layers. Bit of distant color, or distant light I should say, a few dots, dashes, all suggesting things, maybe a farmhouse in the distance. And now these sort of cool landscape colors. If you get a set of pastels, just get a landscape set and they'll include these sort of colors, pinkish colors and violet colors. Very nice for aerial perspective. Closer in, some stronger yellow. See how it just brings in that zing of color. And you can notice that I don't, I do vary the pastel strokes I put in. Here, for instance, more coloring in the distance, smaller shapes that aren't going to stand out too much, but in the foreground areas I tend to really grind the pastel in, making strong shapes. And this is pretty much how I paint with a brush too. Just merging in some of those edges and that lovely sort of sky blue in the hills. Some violets contrasting with the warm colors, suggesting shadows and ruts in the road. But a stronger orange, picking up some of those colors in the road. And this is sort of a flesh peach color, but quite useful to bring in a light earthy color. Getting in some aerial perspective in the distance again. This helps to bring the road down and head it into the painting instead of up. The warm colors come forward, these cooler colors recede and go down and into the distance. A few more of these sparkles of light. And now you can bring in a pencil for a few specific details, or here just adding some texture, a few stones in the road maybe. Just make these marks and the mind fills in all the details. So with a little journal painting like this, a pencil can be most useful. And here I'm putting in some telephone poles. Very quick and easy to do with the pencil. And how about some fence posts for the farmlands? A bit more texture here and there. And this painting is just about done. So a fun and pretty quick journal sketch you can do outdoors or in the studio. And I think it brings back good memories of your travel, and a painting that doesn't create too much pressure on you. It's just something to have some fun. What I like is it also forces you to simplify, so working in a small format like this is a good exercise. Just last thing, softening up some of those edges in the sky with a bit of off-white pastel. And that's about it. I think we must just sign this off. And I hope you've enjoyed this little demonstration. And try it out for yourself.